Herod escorts Augustus through Judea on this trip in 20 BC. After he leaves, he erects a temple in white stone in the new territory given him by Augustus at the headwaters of the Jordan River in dedication or recognition of Augustus. So, where is this all leading? About 14 or 15 years ago, here in Athens, I was having tea with a famous person that I'm afraid only a few of us in the room will know now, Judith Binder. And she knew more about the topography of Athens, I think, than almost any living human being. Or does know more about it. She's still not with us here in Athens, but lives in Germany. And we were chatting, and we were talking about Josephus. She found out I'd been working with Josephus and so on. And she said, well, Mark, what do you make of those statues of Herod on the Acropolis? And of course, my answer so often to a question that Judith asked was, huh? And she informed me that there are 2 statue bases in the magazines of the Acropolis that were removed from the Acropolis in the 1950s. She saw them as a student and been stored away that have never been seen since. In fact, I tried a few years ago to see them, and no one could seem to know to even tell me where to go. The 2 statue bases are these. And I apologize for this fairly ugly Greek script, but I'm working with a new Unicode font and I haven't figured out a prettier script yet. The demos, we don't know what the verb is, but it's probably made, dedicated, appointed, so on. The demos, the King Herod, friend of the Romans, on account of his beneficence and his goodwill towards the demos itself, understood, erected this statue or something like that. So say the verb is missing. All right? And then the second one, the demos, I don't know how to go to the, I have to go over to the slideshow, we won't worry about it. The demos, again, dedicates a statue, a provision or something, to the King Herod, pious and friend of Caesar, for his arete, for his virtue, for his goodness, and for his beneficence. Now, it's readily understood, and there's not much argument, that the second inscription is later. It's probably Herod's grandson, just by the terminology. The first inscription is generally recognized to be, well, generally recognized. Nobody even knows these exist, basically, except for Dittenberg, who put them in his text, but would be recognized as being the one that went to Herod. It was set up, as the Latin implies there, Dittenberg's Latin implies, east of the Parthenon. So in a very important spot on the Acropolis, near the Temple of Augustus in Roma and Augustus. What did Herod do to get a statue erected on the Acropolis? A Jewish king gets a statue erected on the Acropolis that calls him the friend of the Romans. And I think you probably can see where I'm going. He was the broker between Augustus and Athens in the crucial years 20 to 19 BC that restored the relations. A couple of points on these things, on this inscription. As I say, it's unusual that what is unusual in this inscription here is this term Philoromaeus. It starts occurring about, friend of the Romans. It starts occurring about 40 years before this, we see it. But it's always people in the East proclaiming themselves friend of the Romans, all right? When they present. This is the only time that I know of where someone calls a king a friend of the Romans. And it would make sense if the reason why was he did something for them with the Romans. It's clearly not your standard boilerplate honorific that the Athenians were so ready to give out. They are in debt to Herod. The reflexive eis theauton seems to emphasize that, what he had done for the demos. And they pay him back, the Athenians pay him back in the way they know best. They announce the debt of the demos to him and put up a statue of him in the most prestigious spot in the city, as I say, east of the Parthenon. It was Herod, a Jewish king, but also the friend of Augustus and an ardent Philhellene, who reconciled the first and most famous Greek city with the first Roman emperor. In attempting to show Herod's extraordinary generosity and patronage, the historian Josephus, about whom we get all of our information about Herod, provides a long list of the gifts of Herod in money and buildings to all the cities throughout the eastern Mediterranean. But he doesn't mention Athens. There's no evidence that Herod ever gave a cent to Athens or built a building for them. Yet he gets a statue by the city. It seems hardly likely that Josephus wouldn't have mentioned a fact like that if he knew it, because he wants to play up the relationship between Herod and the Greek city-states. But he mentions nowhere that Herod gave money to, or gave a gift or anything like that to Athens. So it strikes me that, and yet a diplomatic reconciliation between Athens and Augustus would have been of very little interest to Josephus. It wouldn't have fulfilled his duty, his intention there of trying to play up the material benefits that Herod gave. So no evidence that Herod ever gave money or buildings to Athens. He endowed the Olympics, for God's sakes. Right? And yet he gets a statue on the Acropolis. My guess is it was because he was the one who brokered the reconciliation between Augustus and the Athenians. Is it likely? Well, in 15 BC, Marcus Agrippa, again, the great friend of Augustus, co-equal almost in power of Augustus, was traveling through the east. And guess who spent all this time with him? Herod. Traveled with him all through the east, all through Asia Minor. In northwest Asia Minor, the wife of Marcus Agrippa, Julia, the daughter of Augustus, almost got washed away in the Scamander River. For you people who know your Iliad, you know the Scamander River. It had swollen from rain, and she was crossing it at night, and she almost got carried away. And Agrippa, angry at the Ilians for not coming to the rescue of his wife, fined them 1,000 talents, which is a lot of money. The Ilians were in distress. They approached Herod and asked him to intervene with Agrippa. And Herod did. And he got the fine removed, and he restored relations between Agrippa and the Ilians, and the Ilians set up a statue for Herod in their city. So I suspect there's a parallel case for where we're going. What's in it for Herod? Why did he do it? Why is he operating this way? Well, he gets a statue out of it here in Athens. He does a favor for Augustus. That's what we forget about these things. You know, we treat Greek and Roman history, or say Greek history under the Romans fairly simplistically. You know, the Romans are conquerors, and the Greeks are no longer the classical Greeks, and they have to obey, and the Romans are brutish and nasty, and they don't know philosophy. It's not anywhere near as imprecise or unrefined as that. Herod did a favor for Augustus. He puts Augustus in a position to be generous to Athens, if Athens will only make the right approach. He builds the relationship for Augustus with Athens. That's valuable to Augustus. Right? That's what Herod gets out of it, his brokerage here. Right? And my last point, and I won't carry it on unduly, is that I want to make is that we tend to think too much in terms, I say, of Romans and Greeks. What's Herod? He's the king of the Jews. Let's see, he builds cities throughout the Eastern Mediterranean in the Greek and Roman form. He finances Olympic festivals. He finances the production of Greek literary works. Is he a Jew? Is he a Greek? Or is he Mediterranean? Which is what I suggest he is. And what the point of this is that this little story of Herod and Augustus and Athens brings together the point that, you know, you've been spending time here at the International Center for the Study of Hellenic and Mediterranean culture. Mediterranean culture, as I would call it, started about now, under Augustus. Up to this point, Mediterranean culture had been more or less, with the Romans especially in the East, had been pretty disorganized and pretty brutal. Under Augustus, things changed. It began to become more systematic. Men like Herod began to be able to work within a world with the Romans and coordinate and arrange things.